Busy signal.
Yeah, is it a call? I mean, it's meeting, it could be that.
Does it sound? It's not. It doesn't sound like it's coming from that phone, right?
No.
No.
Got nothing on the speaker.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. We can,
All right, let's call the April 8th, 2021 planning board meeting.
Okay.
Ms. Tanya, you know, roll call yet?
we sure have.
Awesome. Okay, so it comes to approve. Does everybody have opportunity to do that for January 14th? Okay.
Make a motion. Well, I can't make a motion.
We
can I?
have a motion, do I say?
Second.
Awesome. Have a motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Awesome. March 11th. Planning board minutes, everybody have opportunity to do those?
Yes.
Motion?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion second. All those in favor? Awesome. Ms. Tanya, how we looking on public comments? Do you have anything?
We don't have anything tonight.
All right, so that brings the board commissioner comment responses, anything?
Anything that they want to say?
Everybody good? All right, so, that brings us to new business.
So y'all know that we're working on a draft of the Unified Development Ordinance. That's something that state laws requiring us to come into compliance, and to do that, instead of bringing 20, 40, 50 ordinances to y'all, we're putting them in one book. So there's a few items that as we're drafting that we kind of need some input on so that we can finish drafting. And one of them is just procedurally. Ben and I and Taylor have been working on what types of procedures, and do y'all want to include your bylaws into the UDO or ordinance? Which way did you want to do that?
Yeah, just in terms of, is there anything out of the bylaws that if we're gonna reopen the planning ordinance, anything that's in the bylaws that might want to go into the ordinance? For instance, the one thing that kind of came up is attendance. And right now, the attendance policy is in the bylaws, which means the planning board doesn't really have the authority to remove someone for non-attendance. That has to go to the commissioners to do that. Is that the kind of thing that y'all would like to put into the ordinance, that the planning board has the authority to do that, or are you fine with it the way it is?
We used that previously to remove a member planning board.
Yep. I can think once that it's been done since I've been here. And both times it's had to go to the commissioners. The commissioners have done it, but if that's,
So what would have happened, we would have made a recommendation to the commissioners, and they would have acted.
yeah, then you would basically say this person has not. We had one person who moved to Myrtle Beach, and we could never get up with them to get them to resign. They just never resigned. So it became, okay, well, we need to get this person off, and then it had to go to the commissioners. Or you could say the planning board could vote after a person misses a certain number of times and then remove it yourself, or just, that's come up as an issue in the past.
That was the one time was somebody moved away and no contact.
Yeah.
Then what was the second time?
That they just missed too many meetings.
We just, the paper just told the county commissioners that this person's missed such and such number of meetings. It's our recommendation that they be removed.
That they be removed and replaced by whoever.
Okay.
Or it just makes the attendance policy a little bit more meaningful,
Right.
which may or may not be something that y'all are concerned with.
Probably the only times we're concerned if we have multiple months with no quorum.
Well, you know, that's true, but you know, if you think about it, that may be a little bit short. But Mr. Taylor over there, everybody's doing a great job through Zoom meetings. So if you are seeing it, even if you have, you know, medical issues, whatever, and you feel you can beat there, and the person Zoom does help with forms sometimes. We just are on the second meeting, face to face in the last 12 months anyway. We've done everything with Zoom. I know everybody does have great internet reception, but, attendance is still important.
I agree. I mean, the thing is, you agreed to serve on this committee, on this board, then serve on it. If you're not gonna come to meetings, you're not gonna participate, then, I mean, participation is the only way that it gets done. So there needs to be some accountability somewhere.
So what's the question, whether the board has the right to kick a member off or
Whether y'all
send
can
it?
change it.
If we want it to be our power or we recommend
The
it.
commissioners, and we can write the words up, but right now, y'all don't have that power. Do you want to ask for that power?
Huh? We need.
I think we should control that.
All of this supposed to be an advisory board to the commissioners. I mean, at some point, if we did at one time, we had the ability to make reasonable decisions amongst ourselves. And, us having the ability to do one of that is not necessarily a bad thing, but still don't have to be, majority. And I'm going out on a limb, I can speak for myself, and I can't speak for another soul, but there's something about serving on this planning board, we have to have a passion for the county. So we need to be able to, if we need to do it, we're going to some of these decisions on.
Jean Brooks agrees. Wants y'all to know.
Ms. Turner, with the motion?
Is this just discussion? You
Yeah, I
want
think
me
it's just
Just-
discuss about as we go through this kind of thing, some things that came up. Because what we're trying to do is to adapt all, 15 different ordinances into a standardized procedure. And that, since they're all a little bit different, there's gonna be a few little things done, but also the whole planning board stuff. The other thing that came up to me, I think about the organization of the planning board, are the subcommittees that have been done in the past. And right now, it's just silent on that. Did you want a more formal process, us to write that down? Do you like having the ability to customize it as you see fit? Or do you think we need changes to appointing subcommittees?
Before we get there, just back to the other thing, just for a second. On the other, boards that the county commissioners appoint people to that haven't had the authority to do what we're looking to do as a planning board, to remove somebody from without going to the county commissioners. Is that something that other boards also have the authority to do, or does it make us different than what the other county boards are doing?
I believe so, but I'm not entirely certain. You know,
I've served on a number of boards, both as commissioner in 2014 and, since being sworn on December 7th. So many of the boards are different. The county commissioners, in large part, appoint, the members to this board. Some of the other boards are, for example, Recreation and Parks. The school board names a member, and so many different entities are naming members. And in those boards particularly, county commissioners have a lot of authority, because there's so many different entities, pushing and pulling. This one is primarily a county board, as I understand it. Is that right?
that would,
And so therefore, ultimately, the county commissioners are going to have, as I see it, the authority to make appointments and or to remove people. But I think you guys need to have the authority. You need to make recommendations to the county board if the county continues to make those appointments. Well, the county will continue to make the appointments, but the removal is a whole different issue. I'm not sold on either way as far as being a county commissioner. I think we ought to listen to you guys, and if you think somebody's not pulling their weight, particularly not showing up. What are there, 13 members of this board?
Yes.
And you have 2 vacancies currently.
Mhm.
And so today, you have 5 that are not here.
No, we've got one,
Two.
Yeah, somebody on
two,
Zoom.
Zoom.
Okay, all right. Who are the 2 on Zoom? On Zoom?
Is it one?
No, it's one on
Just
Zoom,
Jean.
sorry, yeah.
So we've got 3 members that aren't here. Yeah.
Now, my understanding, Mr. School was involved in a traffic accident.
Oh,
So, I mean, in that particular situation, there could obviously be excused on his part.
absolutely.
And I mean, the only thing, this is my opinion, what he's suggesting as far as us being able to remove, in all due respect to the commissioners, you guys already have an extremely full agenda. The plate's already full. So for us to be able to assume some responsibility is not exactly bad.
I'm not arguing with that at all.
If I can speak there,
Sure.
thank you. What would it be like to say you have X number of absences allowed per year? And you exceed that, and you're going to have to begin.
So we have some language for that, but it also comes to, and I think the things in there that speaks to the chair has discretion, like for medical or something like that, those can be excused. But just somebody who just isn't able to come on a repeated basis, they have other obligations, that all reflects back.
Not a priority.
You know, it's odd you say that because I remember a couple of years ago, when help was not exactly the best in the world. I remember one time being on a road and stepped into the back of an ambulance and I asked the attendant to call over and let you guys knew I wouldn't be making me. So I understand, you know, and Mr. Squirrel has been a very contributing member. He's done that. And I hate to know he's been hurt or not doing well. I like to hear that. But, that whole idea is pretty good. That's my opinion.
But you have discretion, for a situation to give excused absences. So there's 2 absences that I think currently are knowledge where it is, it doesn't apply in some situations when somebody has an issue.
Yeah, and I think it's consecutive. It's like 3,
Okay.
2 or 3.
More than 2, I think is what it
Yeah,
says.
more than 2 consecutive unexcused absences is what it says is the policy. Now, that has never been enforced very well because it then gets sent to commissioners and we kind of had this, but just how much teeth do you want the attendance policy to have is the question. Do you want it?
Reasonable.
Okay.
Reasonable idea. Yeah, I mean,
I think we can fix that.
We
That's-
can draft something.
It's not, drafting the language is not, I just didn't know how y'all felt about that issue.
And I had no idea that David was involved in an accident. I didn't have no way of knowing that. And I'm not trying to point any fingers at any present or missing members. That was not my intention.
well, there are, and just as well with anything, I mean, obviously there's things that can be excused. And,
Sure.
you know, I have worked with David ever since he was, first came on the line board, and he's been very good. He's got some great ideas and he's contributed a lot to the county. And, you know, something like him being, you know, for him to be excused, not the way I see it.
Oh, I totally agree.
Because once again, it comes right back down to every single planning board member that's on this board right now. Every one of us, we have a passion. And we're serving simply because of the love of county. You know, we are very concerned about our community. So I like that idea. Let's do it.
Okay, Ben can draft us some stuff up.
Cool. All right now.
It's not an issue, and I don't have a problem with one here, it's just asking a question. Whereas an advisory board with the county commissioners appoint, we don't have the authority to appoint somebody to a board. We can make a recommendation. Is there some issue with the fact that the county commissioners appoint somebody to this board, but then we take it upon ourselves to remove somebody without going to the authority board who appointed the person to begin with?
Well, I understand what you're saying. And, the last thing I'm looking for says that if we did something like that, it would obviously be an attendance issue.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like as if it would be, you know, we would say without anybody and say, well, you're not gonna be here no more, it's not like that. I mean.
So the word could be, as such to where it was specific about, or is it just a broad stroke of thing?
No, it would just be.
Okay, all right.
So, that's really not bad.
Okay, I see.
One other question. I assume whatever is decided here then still goes before the county commissioners for approval.
Right, these are just the recommendations that the planning board wish to recommend. Because right now, that authority, the authority to remove someone for non-attendance is vested with the commissioners. And then do we just transfer that exact same language from the commissioners to the planning?
Right, but the commissioners would then have to approve that,
Yes.
that change.
Yes, so it's all.
Ray, I don't have any problem with that at all.
I think it's a good idea.
I'm one of 5 members, so I can't.
Well, I think it puts us in charge of our own housekeeping.
Well, and it's nothing wrong with that. Honestly, I feel like we do need, it's like you said earlier, we are an advisory board to the commission. At the same time, the commissioners, everything they're having to oversee, govern, and look at, the plates are already full. So something like attendance on our part, if that's something we can look at and we don't say, handle it in-house, as long as there is an attendance issue. And, like you said earlier, young lady, moved to Myrtle Beach. Well, okay, she's living in Myrtle Beach. I assume that she's living out in this county. So she's not really going to be,
There's two parts there. She's not attended and she's not eligible anymore.
right. So removing her, which I hate to lose anybody. I do. I like it when everybody. But in a situation like that right there, I understand all the protocol, but if we haven't been able to handle that in-house, then that could have been handled and a new nominated appointment could have been suggested in a matter of a short time. And we could have kept right on moving on.
I agree.
And I do not want you to get in a position that a quorum is an issue. So that's major. That is, your numbers need to say it, that's what I'm saying.
2018 into early 2019, that was a repeated issue.
I'll take it as my fault.
Well, you're one person of 13.
And even after you were back, you still.
Yeah. We had to cancel and move to quite a few meetings.
Yeah, we had special.
Yeah, that was where this issue.
Yep. And that's when some of that attendance issue had to be forced.
I remember that.
That was very high, just non-state.
It is. Are we good on that, Ms. Sonia?
I think we're good on that. So the subcommittee thing, sounds like we may need to put some kind of language in there just to secure us.
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
I mean, it's one way there, just how formal. A lot of this comes into just how formal do the processes want to be. And how there's always that trade-off between having the flexibility to kind of do what you want and having a standardized process to where you would say, we want to form a subcommittee and all the subcommittee rules are already set up. So then you don't have to go through that.
Right now, is there any, I'm not thinking now, what the bylaws say about subcommittees.
They don't say
Nothing at all, it's just.
one way or the other, completely vacant.
And we've been doing that when we wrote the HIDA, we went to solar ordinance, we broke into subcommittee. As a board, y'all picked some members that would sit on those subcommittees. We're about to do the snow camp area zoning, so that's also gonna be something that we, not just planning board members, but we'll put a subcommittee together likely. So seems to be a little bit popular for our small projects to move forward like that.
Best I can remember the last couple of years, the committees have been very well there. They really have.
It's just a matter of how formalized and you want to make the language like this, like, how it's like, right now, I guess there's nothing there at all.
So you have complete flexibility.
Complete flexibility, we want to keep complete flexibility, we want to put some rules in place that kind of govern how that process happens.
That thing is left up to everybody else, and all honesty, the last couple of subcommittees, I'm aware of myself, actually went extremely well.
I was gonna say, the process at this point is working.
It worked extremely well.
Without a written set of guidelines, we just kind of worked it out ourselves.
Well, and to me, the best I can remember is the one that I was part of myself, and you as well as I did. We were effective, but at the same time, we were relaxed. It was not like as if It was nothing very coarse about it. I mean, we was actually able to get together, compromise, work together, come up with a plan that would actually benefit the county. So instead of having, you know, a group of things that we had to be concerned about, of course, that being as good as it was, I mean, I'm giving you credit where I feel like it's due.
So Gene says, leave the committees the way it is now, the more flexibility, the better.
I like it. You good with that? Awesome. Are we good this time?
That's regulation.
For that item, we are.
All right, that brings up the old business.
No, we don't.
We're not.
We're not, I thought you said.
Just that piece of that item. I'm sorry, I didn't say that correctly.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So we do also have membership restrictions. This has come up recently. Do we want to restrict how membership is done? Will it be relatives, ex officio members, anything like that?
No.
Because like when we talked about, should we allow an ex officio member from the school or from other boards that would play a role in our planning decision? We don't currently have that. The only ex officio is the commissioners.
If I may say, it's the board who would nominate, approve, or disapprove and be voted on. So that would be the democratic process that seems to work. So if there were a problem with the board members that were present, I would imagine it would rise and be dismissed, that petition. Am I wrong?
I don't think so. That's just my opinion. I'm not gonna say a whole lot about it. But I will say this planning board is basically working with land use ideas, ordinances, waiver requests, things of that nature. We're not dealing with finances or anything of that type of nature. We're still an advisory board to the commissioners. Nothing that we say is actually etched in stone. Okay, it still has to have approval of the board. So, yes, sir.
I personally, the family thing, whatever, doesn't bother me. I think it's more important that we have different sections of the county to be represented than in my mind. But I can guarantee you that there's one or more board members that do not agree with my philosophy. And that's an issue. And to be very honest, we didn't put the planning board reps on the docket. Ron Higgin and I set the docket. We didn't put it on this past Monday's docket because we knew with the new lawsuit and the bringing in an attorney from out of town and all kinds of things of that sort, that our docket was just jammed. And we didn't want anything else controversial. We even moved some of the tax issues off of that docket for this past Monday because of that issue. And we knew that was going to be very time consuming. And as Ben knows, unfortunately, we were right with the time consumption. But having said that, I think you guys need 2 more members, and I think it needs to happen soon. We still have a member particularly that's just adamant that it will not happen with a family member and that sort of thing. And I'm not going to mention any names, don't need to. We have 2 that are skeptical about that issue particularly. I personally, I think the dedication and as I recall, particularly well, you can have 2 members from one precinct, man, that's correct, isn't it?
We changed it to 3.
3 now?
3 from any township.
Right. I think the disparity in the townships is extremely important to me. I don't think you need to violate the number 3 or whatever it is. And I think your board's way too large anyway, 13, that's incredible. And it makes it hard for you guys to reach a quorum.
I agree with that.
And just makes it tough to function in my mind.
So that number does come from literally the 13 townships we have. That's how all of that came about.
How long has that been in place?
Since this board started. I didn't see any old rules.
It's
So-
changed. It's
Okay.
changed. It's been probably 10 or 12 years ago. It was changed. It was a couple of plans ago. And I remember the discussion about that particular issue.
I don't have any problem with the number, except that it makes it so hard for you guys to function.
Yeah,
You gotta get 50% plus one.
That's
Is that-
Simple majority.
Yeah, what we used to have alternates.
Yes. that's
We
what-
had like 13 members and 6 alternates or something that could serve if one of the regular members wasn't here, and it was even more unwieldy than it is now.
I bet so.
Yeah, that's,
Because you had people showing up who would, one meeting they could vote, and the next meeting they couldn't vote, but they would still vote. And then who voted on, it was a mess.
it got real muddy, didn't it?
It did. So that's why they got rid of the alternates.
The best I can remember in that discussion, the biggest reason we went to townships is simply because every township is different. You know, so if we have a representative from each township, at least, you know, in our eyes, where we would go in on those, that particular part of county's covered.
But you can't do that. It's 38 precincts now.
But it's townships.
Townships. 13.
13, okay.
That's the biggest reason we did that. I remember that discussion. It was pretty, it took a while. I remember that. So, and that was the whole purpose behind it, to make sure that every part of the county did have due representation. That's why we.
Well, my comment about eligibility is this, and it's probably not a popular opinion, but this is my opinion. I think it's hard to serve on this board and serve this board while you're serving another board. For example, if you sit on the city council of another city in this county, Burlington, Graham, All River, Ossipee, whatever, I think that's two masters you're serving. I think Board of Education is the same sort of thing. There are decisions that we're gonna make about land use that are affected or could affect those kinds of things, like where schools go, or where the subdivisions go that serve schools, or where towns and town boundaries and county boundaries come, you know, together, and what happens to those lands that are affected by what we decide, and they sit adjacent to Hall River city limits or Burlington city limits or whatever. I just feel like those people are not going to look at those things the same way that we would as ordinary citizens that doesn't have a stake as a member of a council.
Mr. Wilbur, I remember from 96 to current day now, there's been one planning board member that came on that had his own self-serving agenda. One. He served maybe a year. And he was out.
Well, I'm not suggesting those people would have their own agenda. I'm just saying as things happen that we would be dealing with, you don't know until, you know, all of a sudden there's something that would be advantageous to the city of All River or the town of Elon, or whatever. And
That's kind of sort of, I didn't mean off kilter or nothing, but I mean, based on what I've noticed since then, 96, since then, what I've noticed is every member has got an open mind about beneficial needs for this county, without it being a situation of, I'm on this board, I'm a part of this social group, I do this right here, I'm going to do this, benefit both sides. Generally, with the planning board, it has been what is in the best interest of the county as a whole. So, like I said, from then to now, there's only been one member. And he didn't serve he didn't serve full term. He served a year, and with no pressure applied, he just, when he came in and seen the way things actually worked, that's when he decided that he was going to like his way. He did, and there's no hard feelings. If I see him right now, I'm sick to shake his hand, how you doing? Ask that. But what I can attest to from my very first meeting to current thing now, everybody has had an open mind for Alamance County. That's what's been. So I understand the potential of folks doing stuff like it, but what you're saying is right. It is, we've tried so hard to be transparent and fair across the board. And, you know, you're right. If you're serving a town council, if you're on an elected board, serving on the planning board out here is council like double dipping. That's the way I see it. Elected government.
Does the county commissioner count for a quorum of their position?
No.
Just.
They're ex officio.
They are a liaison.
County commissioners liaison. Each county council give us feedback as what the commissioners are looking for, what they need help on, things like that. Gives us a little bit of help on right there. We can get around on it, you better serve.
But if they're here or not, it doesn't affect our quorum. Is there, would there be a situation where having a school board ex officio, that was called, member of the planning board in a similar role as the county commissioner to bring a perspective in from that side? Would that be a benefit to the planning board?
Any kind of citizen, and this is just my personal opinion, any type of citizen input would be nice. You know, we can actually get input from somebody that's actually got a good full understanding of what's going on, or what's, and I don't make it sound ugly, has the knowledge and experience of what we need at that time. If they can come in and help us out, that'd be awesome. That's my thought.
So it seems like the board's opinion that maybe we don't need to slate a seat for ex officios, but depending on the project, invite if we feel like that's the kind of input we need.
I think that's right. Don't you?
That'd be fine.
What you think?
Yeah, I mean, I serve on the Parks Commission. We have a school board member and a county commissioner that when they're going to be there, that show up and vote at various times based on discussion, offer great comments and great direction for us. I don't know if that would be the same need for the planning board to have a school board member present at times. It may be, having that ability to invite them might be helpful.
Gene does have a comment too. He says we have members now that serve on the soil and water. Which, Gene, maybe make more comment. Is that a positive or negative for you? We'll see what it says.
You know, it's an open meeting. Anybody can show up, school board, county commissioner, it doesn't matter. You know, just general population or non-resident can show up at these meetings. And if you recognize them being the chair, then they can speak. Otherwise, they cannot, which is fine. I don't see that as a problem either. Yeah, I'm here for two reasons. Reason number one is so if I can give some input and what's going on with the county commissioners and help out, then that's what I want to do. Secondly, it allows me to take information back to other county commissioners as a chair if they contact me as to, hey, this is, you know, kind of what they're looking at, what they feel is smart and so forth. And I've had with all the other four board members conversations about your two vacancies, because I'm really pushing to have those two vacancies filled, for example. But having attended this meeting or your meetings, I don't think I missed any. I hope not. You know, but yeah, it gives me some input, and then I can say, guys, this is what they think, and then they can tell me whatever. And I don't have an obligation to go back to them legally, but I feel like morally I do have an obligation to at least let them know what your ideas are, and I'll try to do that as fully as I can. School board member, they're not going to have a vote anywhere. So I'm not.
We're gonna take, yeah.
Okay.
We're ready, Gene.
Hey, I've just got one question. If we put something in place that says we don't want other elected people on the board, and we've already had people that have been elected to the soil and water on the board, are we being hypocrites?
Yeah.
I think maybe it comes back down to what we were discussing with the relative the board has the ability to interview candidates and to make recommendations on who they feel is right. And so leaving that flexibility there, although we may never use it, maybe the best course of action.
And what did he say? I couldn't hear.
What he said was, if we're talking about eligibility of people that serve another elected position such as soil and water, then we already have soil and water elected soil and water board members on this board. Are we being hypocritical?
That's kind of sort of the deal
Is that not what he said?
That is what he said. Yeah, that's absolutely.
Well, the best I can remember, and I understand there may be some controversy or whatever. Right now, with the two members that we have, we're gonna say nominated and sent over to the committee. Both members were voted on, both of them. There was not a dissenting vote of these two. Both of them came in unanimous. We're sending that over to the commissioners for their approval. And I guess, it's the same thing like we were talking earlier about dismissing someone for their attendance, okay? I understand, that the commissioners want everything to be, without issue, I understand. At the same time, that particular week, how many people was in attendance that night? It was a quorum for real that night, was it not?
Yeah.
All right, so there was a quorum for real. I mean, we did have an issue regular quorum, and every last one went for both candidates without fail.
I was at that meeting.
You was there. But it's one of those things, I understand everybody's apprehension, but at the same time, it comes right back to what I said earlier. All of ours is an advisory committee to the commission. We do not get to go over Ms. Hook and say, because check flag. We don't get to do that. All we're after is ordinances, waiver request, things of that issue matter. So, with that being said, I feel like in this opinion of mine, I've had for quite some time, we need to have some abilities of our own to function as a board. At the same time, provide the county commissioners and the people of this county the best options available.
That's right. So I don't have any heartburn whatsoever if they're coming from an elected board or a family member or anything like that. The best qualified candidate at the time that we're making discussions. And it came down to two people on one of the spots that we recommended. One was a no-brainer. The other one, it came down to how we thought, and both candidates were quite qualified. And it came down in my mind that one was already serving this county. Elected as it was, that's fine. And that could have offered some great stuff, but it gave another person an opportunity to serve the county. I mean, we're all in the same boat. Might have got different oars, but I mean, we're all in the same boat. Serving the county is what's the most important, and a qualified candidate. That's fine.
That's good to feel willing to qualify candidates. There's a market right there, but the willingness to do so for out of their own time and resources.
It sounds like to me, we're not interested in changing the ordinance for ex officio or making any specifics on how membership needs to go.
Well, there's nothing in place right now anyway. Is
No,
Right
no.
now, that's- that would be no-
Then just let that
No,
just keep on moving on. If it comes up issue later, then we'll look at qualifying at a later date.
All right, so there's really only one other topic. This is gonna be kind of out of your normal brain thing. A board of adjustment has to be established for the county. As we write this UDO and as we're going into zoning for the snow camp, a board of adjustment has to be established. We have a board of adjustment that has not met since the late 90s that only addresses watershed right now. So it's really not something that anybody's familiar with because it's been over 20 years since that board met. Board of adjustment is created to hear variances and special use permits and things like that. Now, with that being said, planning boards consider board of adjustments, commissioners consider board of adjustments, or you can create your own whole separate board to hear those types of things. It's not in any of our ordinances now because we've never had to deal with that. But as we write, is there any opinion here of whether the planning board would want to serve as both planning board and board of adjustment?
I would say right now, the county commissioners, if
No, they do the way.
other than the watershed, which has its own board, all the rest would go to the county commissioners as currently set up. So is there a desire to have a freestanding board of adjustment? Or should we take the watershed and give the watershed to the commissioners?
Explain to me again what an example of something would come before the board of adjustments would be.
Variances, if somebody can't meet one of the requirements.
Y'all seen the mobile home park
That's a given.
ordinance where there was some street issues? Y'all remember that, Ray? I know you remember that, because we talked about septic crossing their streets, and we needed some road width variance and lot size variances because they couldn't meet it for geographic reasons. Their lots couldn't quite meet what we needed. Y'all heard that? Y'all made an opinion and a recommendation, and the board of commissioners finalized that. This generally would not hit two boards. It only hits one usually. It can hit two. But those types of things, they need a variance from what the ordinance says, and they need to come to a board. That's not a staff decision. The boards have to make that decision.
So in a situation where the planning board is board of adjustments in that scenario, we would have made the decision ourselves as opposed to taking the next step to the county commission.
They're a quasi judicial hearing, so there's very specific rules on what you're allowed to hear, how you're allowed to have those hearings, those kind of things. That's why y'all got a little bit of that school government training before we heard those. That was for that because it's so particular. It's just something that can easily go to court if we miss one little thing.
So there is a lot of.
Huge liability, much more than any other decision we make.
Right, and yeah, whoever, the board of the route to appeal goes from the board of adjustment to Superior Court. So if you create a separate one, then that board would hear it. It wouldn't necessarily go to the commissioners. It goes directly from whatever is the board of adjustment to Superior Court. Yeah.
We should also.
We process the liability. I also had an
There's no
opinion, but then-
personal liability for y'all.
Right.
Because you're acting as a judge, so you have immunity, but it's just it's about how much authority and weight. What we have said in the past has been, it's difficult to act as because we didn't have zoning, we didn't have this infrastructure in place. It's difficult to put on your just a recommendation, have no authority, and then put on your, I have just about the most authority I can have. And balancing those two could be problematic.
How large of a board is the Board of Adjustment?
How many members do they have?
There is no minimum.
I think the minimum is 3 or 5, and I don't think there's a maximum.
And they would hold hearings on these variances or special use permits. Or
It's a very specific process that the state sets out for that. The staff kind of handles getting it set up like we do y'all's agendas. It would be similar, but they're very specific on how those are handled.
And so, yeah, I think
And we have, this board is going to be hearing rezonings and ordinance changes, all the stuff you already hear, plus rezonings.
Then they need to have their own staff on board. That's what they think. They need to have.
I think that's what you're saying, isn't it, Ben? It's hard for us to sit in this seat and just
Well-
make a recommendation and then sit on another Tuesday and say, have a final rule about it.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways to set it up. You could have a portion of the planning board do that. You could have a separate freestanding, like Board of Equalization Review. If you deal, that's the Board of ENR, the Board of Equalization Review hears this exact issue in the tax realm.
Right.
So you'd be creating a Board of ENR for land use purposes. But it's the same type of hearings, the same type of structure, the way that would be. Do you want that separate board, or do you want the commissioners to continue to hear it the way they would now?
Well, the commissioners think about that.
Well, one, the Board of ENR, there is an appeal to the county commissioners, as I understand.
That's
That
right.
does not go straight to Superior Court.
There is, but it's That's by statute, just in terms of something people might be familiar with, where, because they do, those are quasi judicial hearings and everything, so. It's not exactly the same, but.
Yeah, I think it's very different. I'm not sure. How do I say this without stepping on too many toes? I think too many county commissioners like the authority and like decision making. And I suspect they would not give up that authority.
They are, the other part is it's very time consuming to
Yeah.
put one of these hearings on. Both sides present evidence. It's, well, you know, a court is much like a court hearing. So lots of times commissioners don't want that because it burdens their agenda so much.
Well,
And that's true.
yeah, the fault that I'm having, because I'm trying to remember there was a state board I dealt with, on construction, it was been several years ago. The way that board was made up is, there was one person within the state of North Carolina from the environmental. There was one person from the home state board that was a general contractor. There was another person on that board that worked in a particular sector. In other words, everybody was represented, even though it wasn't like the general contractor, we had to put his scaffold back to go out and make somebody's shingle. At least his field was represented. So if this board was a standalone board on its own, not stripping authority away from nobody, not adding extra authority on people that's already there, but at least if it's a standalone board, you could have that board be made up of different parts of the county. Okay. That way, if there was, and I would strongly suggest Commissioner be a part of it. At least that way, the board of commissioners has representation there. So at least that way, it would streamline a little bit. It wouldn't tax down the commissioner's agenda already, which is, from what I'm understanding, is about as full can get without going into overtime. So sometimes assistance with issues is not bad.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is this board going to be chosen and voted on by the planning board?
Well, I don't think
Yeah,
so.
it would be appointed by the commissioners.
So they, the commissioners have to approve this board to be established, I'm assuming this.
Yeah, I mean, they're all of these, all of this UDO, but
And they would meet at their own specified time.
whenever there was something to hear.
Right.
Which is how often you think, Tommy, typically in the past, and so on this pops
Well-
up.
Oh, well, we don't know. We haven't had zoning in the past.
Right, I mean, that's the.
It's been 20 plus years.
As- Right, as we get into more formal land use than we have now, we are going to have more formal processes than we have now.
How many parcels did you say one time once before there was individual parcels in the county?
We have 90,000
90,000 individual parcels.
plus or minus 1,000.
And
Now, does that include municipalities?
No, that's just county,
Just county?
just
Yeah,
county.
just counting.
90,000 parcels in the county that is potentially going to have a zoning authority over it. That board of adjustment is very necessary.
Oh,
The
yeah.
board of adjustment won't hear rezonings that will come through planning board of commissioners. They hear exceptions to the rules.
I understand, but that's what I'm saying. But still, that board of adjustment is necessary.
But you're talking about already having made a decision with this board, and then an appeal to either that board or the county commissioners. So, again, not every decision is going to be seen, thank goodness, by the county commissioners. It's only the appeals that we're
Well,
talking
so
about.
they wouldn't,
Well, it depends on how you set it up. The way it works right now, and this is under the new 160D, which clarified the new land use rules, is that planning boards have the authority to hear quasi judicial matters and make recommendations. That's what happened with the mobile home park. But the only evidence that can be admitted in the quasi judicial hearing in front of the Board of Adjustment, which in our case happens to be the commissioners, is whether the planning board recommended it, yes or no. So you can say the planning board recommended granting this variance, but the evidence that is presented at the planning board hearing doesn't come in.
Does not, so it's,
It does not.
brand new here.
It's a brand new hearing, and the only bit is just up or down from the board that heard it. They don't know why or anything else. So it's just a question of whether this board has an opinion on whether the time is right to consider this, or whether we just write it up that there are no changes and the commissioners continue to hear what they're already hearing.
This is trial and error, is what you're saying.
Well, it's more of, it's still purely recommendation. There's really no trial at this level. The trial is still at the second level. It's just whether you have a practice trial first.
That's what it is. Practice trial.
Practice trial.
So to give y'all a little background, as we're writing this UDO, we're coming up just under 300 pages. So that will be, this part is what we're trying to kind of wrap up the pieces so that we can get that to y'all. Has to be approved through Board of Commissioners by the end of June. So that's why we're doing this month, so we can get y'all a draft and get y'all fulfilled and go through this and see about getting an opinion from y'all to move it to commissioners.
And if you want to draft your own freestanding board of adjustment, that's going to be a major change that will require a lot of work on our part.
But they can make that modification at a later time.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. There's no reason to do that now.
My concern is we got, agenda meetings and not agenda, budget hearings, all day, 21st and 22nd of April. And we've got to pass a budget before this, well, by June the 30th. So, we're gonna be jammed anyway. I start throwing a whole lot at us, and it's gonna be problematic.
So it's just like any other ordinance, you can come and amend the ordinance at any time that you need to, Josh. 'Cause as we know, hydro and solar, these things are the same thing. It's an ordinance that can be amended.
We can leave it as is right now, and we come back and modify.
Yeah.
it.
Sure, if you start seeing the need.
That's what I was hoping we would hear.
Well, so right now, currently the way it is, the county commissioners operates as the board of adjustment if things were to come up in that nature. I guess we're fine with that. I'd be more interested though down in the future to spread that out amongst whether it's other boards within the county or some of the civilian base or whatever, the citizens or whatever, to come up with that. I think that then it doesn't tie then one group into being compromised. I mean, it's going to give a broad spectrum of ideas and concerns and be represented. That's just my opinion.
Okay, so I think we know what we're doing today, right? Then if we have to revisit this, if things get to where we need that, or if we move forward with some kind of different land use, and then we'll readdress that. But now, I will say we are done with new business now, we can move to old business.
All right, what do you have? Let's talk about old business. What you got?
What y'all have before you is the map that we discussed last time, and we made the adjustments. With a lot of legend and a lot of information in the legend. You've got what you had before, present use value is in there. And then we were asked to add in vacant lands greater than 10 acres, so that's your light green color. General farm use at present use value, that's the yellow color. Industrial land, and that's industrial land per tax. That's not HIDO, that's just industrial land. And then the tax parcel greater than 10 acres plus a house is a darker red. The reds are a little bit hard to distinguish, but if you look at it, you can tell pretty well. We did put the NCIC and Mabin on there since we wanted to show where some of the industrial is. Industrial tends to go where there's water and sewer. They don't tend to go in counties because they need those products and they need those services. So we're going to kind of show some of that. And we had Alamance County Chamber's industrial sites. We had a good long meeting with Matt from the chamber to talk us through where he sees future, where things are looking like, what potential water and sewer opportunities there are. Just a good long discussion. So we put some of his information on there too. We added railroads on there, threw out some more street labelings and stuff so that you can see that a little bit better. And then Marlena actually pulled out acreages for the parcels. You've got highway acreages, tax level industrial land, the chamber's industrial sites, and you got voluntary agricultural district totals, present use value, greater than 10-acre vacant property, and permanently preserved property, and then tax parcels 10 acres with a house. We feel like we've covered what y'all were looking for, but is there something else before we send this on to commissioners?
What is the red and white checkerboard? What am I? Like around the Alamance right there, there's 2 or 3 big ones in the middle. It's
I think
got,
that's part of what Matt told us for
that's it.
future
Okay.
industrial areas, the growth areas for that.
I see some of those picnic basket little things there. Are all those the chamber, industrial site parcels? Or?
Right, that came out in discussion with them. Maybe it's not something that they're
Yeah, I
advertising
I
right
see
now.
several of those kind of dotted around. I didn't know if they were all that same thing.
There's another one right up there under the B,
Yeah.
or above the B in Berlin.
But they're not coded, is that correct, or am I missing something?
I don't know.
know.
I don't think they are.
So I probably have her add that. We had discussions on it, but
And the chambers ones have the blue line. The blue
that's the
hat.
ones that are currently advertising for use, and I believe the hash ones are the ones that were just in our discussions with them. Maybe they're not out there, but they're potentials for what he could see in the future.
What are some of those chamber sites like?
I can't find.
I can't find any.
I wonder if that red got added to the chamber parcels somehow. Cause it looks like there's all of them.
They're
So
all
when I
red and
print-
white instead of blue and white. Is that what you're saying?
It
That's
could
what-
be that when she does it, he converts it, and then I print it to a different printer, we lose some of that. So I'll tell her to change that, so it represents better on the map. It just didn't print well for me, I guess.
But that is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the same things, it's just 2 different colors. The key is one color and the map is the other color.
Well, the bracketing in blue maybe misleads us.
Yeah, I'll have her just change that symbology on there so it represents better.
Guys, I like what you did.
Okay.
So making sure I understand, the majority of that red is a 10-acre parcel with a house, or 10 acres or more. Because the industrial is the pinker.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's a lot of 10-acre plus lots or parcels
That are not farm.
that are not necessarily farm.
They're not, yeah, they haven't been qualified as farms.
They could be farming, but they just aren't under PUB.
Right, we do have those out there, and they have a process to get PUV, so maybe they're not there yet on that, or maybe they're not interested.
Right.
Although it's a tax credit, so maybe.
Right.
I mean, I had a call with Anna, lady that's in that process, she is farming, but they gotta get through that time to get qualified for PUV.
It's 3 years, a 3-year process. What it speaks to me is there's a massive amount of land out there that's 10 acres or more. Owned by someone. And there's a tremendous amount of farmland out there. And the majority of the color that I look at when I see that is yellow, all over.
Hey, Tyler, can you hear me?
CIC stands for?
North Carolina Industrial, it's an industrial park per se, and that, I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, I don't know.
Hey, Taylor.
I'll say coalition, I might be wrong, but it's their industrial park.
Taylor.
And there's just like
No, it's in the Mebane ETJ or it's in the Mebane city limits, one or the other.
It is, but it's kind of showing where industry is in general in the county. We don't have it in the county legally, our jurisdiction, because we don't have the services for people. But the municipalities are supporting that. We still get the taxes off of it, but because they have services of water and sewer, they can provide that better than we can.
go backwards here and ask questions I've been answered 1,000 times. What makes the general farm, these spots in yellow that are general farm plots, what makes them a general farm? Is there certain criteria that they have to meet, or what's the
I'm
classification?
assuming that's all.
Present use value.
Okay.
All of it's under PUD.
And that's tax data. That's how they have to qualify. So from the tax department, that's all.
All the other things is,
In tax, in their defense, it has to be actively used.
That's what I was.
Oh, yeah, they have to qualify. You can't just say you are.
And every 8
they
years,
are,
1/8 of the property in the county has to be reviewed every year.
Right.
So that every farm use property gets at least one review every 8 years.
And that active use means what?
they have to be engaged
Raising the crops, livestock.
in all those things that I talked about last month.
Right.
They're doing all, and that's
So
what
all
Craig
this
does.
yellow is doing all
Yes.
doing some of.
They're audited at least once every 8 years, every piece is seen. And Craig knows, and he's smart enough to know if you're really farming that land or not. As soon
It's
as
just
he-
not about a garden in the backyard. This is
This is legitimate.
legit.
The other interesting thing about all that yellow out there is that's money, as Ben and I were talking about earlier tonight. The county makes money on every piece of those PUVs. For every dollar of tax revenue, they're making about 40-some cents on that dollar. In a residential situation, they're losing money on that dollar because a dollar is something to get the dollar.
Well, that's true.
Pretty much, when you're riding,
Taylor.
like, if you're riding through, you see somebody's got a tomato, corn, cucumber stand on the side of the road, that's part of it.
It could be, I mean,
It's not.
most likely.
Yeah.
And so here-
It's there.
In general, I just put up the requirements, but there's 4 tests. You have to meet the ownership requirement. You have to meet the size requirement, you have to meet the income requirement, and you have to meet the sound management
And the
requirement.
income requirement, was that what we discussed earlier?
$10,000.
So each one of these yellow parcels is making at least $10,000 off of farming.
Yes.
Well, and here's to be fair, a lot of those parcels, let me just say this. If you take all those individual landowners, there aren't that many farmers in this county. But there are enough farmers that are leasing or renting that acreage from a bona fide farmer that it still qualifies as ag use or PUB use.
I just realized there's that much farming going on in the county of a $10,000 plus level.
Oh, yeah. It's a significant piece of the economy of Alamance County.
Yeah, I mean, something like 40% of the land in the county.
Once upon a time, if you did not get socks, milk cows, or full back,
You were dead.
Just to realize that once upon a time, to some degree, still now, with all this yellow that we see here on the farming side, at least on a limited scale and up, 10,000 and up.
Grew up on that tobacco farm, I understand.
Pull some sand loads in your time, man.
Taylor.
I said, you pull some sand loads in
Oh,
your
yeah.
time.
you have got to have gum under your fingers.
So you must look at this.
So if I'm hearing that right, we had just a couple comments and y'all are ready for me to send this to commissioners?
What do you think, guys? Excuse me.
Hey, Taylor.
I think it identifies the pieces that they asked for to be identified.
Mr. Pastor, what do you think?
I think for the commissioners, if you can possibly blow this up so we can see it more
Like,
clearly.
How about enlarge it?
Thank you.
I just put those at your place to see it. I can have these for every
Yeah.
commissioner. It's a lot, they're a very active map, as I told you, like right now. This is easier to read, but our county is just so tall. Unless I'm chopping it now or something, it's hard to.
Don't do that.
North 40, south 40,
I appreciate it.
but we can have these.
The only question I have, there's these few industrial things. You would think there would be more along that corridor that's in the center,
Well,
or they're already developed and that's all that's left to develop.
Yeah, we don't have, when you talk to Mac from the chamber, you just don't have that much left. And what we do have, some of this is getting full and they're looking for other places at this point. to develop that.
And this, and I guess, let me make sure I understand, this doesn't include municipality land. This is just county land.
That's right.
Right, I mean, we included Mebbins and stuff, because that's kind of a point that Chamber of Commerce is working on right now and everything.
Right.
But we didn't grab everything out of all of the
Right.
municipalities.
I guess, in some of that gray in there are industrial sites that don't belong to the county.
Yes.
Right.
Can you include those? City of Wilmington, for example, and so forth. The reason I'm saying that is, as a county commissioner, I'm constantly working with the chamber, and we're looking for sites for a larger, pick whatever you like, a hotel complex or whatever, but all those type things, they're not gonna go to Snow Camp, and they're not going up in the northern part of the county. They want to be right on the I-95.
They want transportation and
Exactly,
access
So you
to it.
want the existing or any future spots left?
yes.
Right.
Are we satisfied with that, Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Okay, right before we got into that, Bill was gonna ask a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about, unified development ordinance before we went into no business. This unified development ordinance and the draft y'all are coming up with, that doesn't change any of the language inside the existing ordinances that we have. It just brings them all into a guideline and some other stuff that we've been talking about boards and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it doesn't really change any of the verbiage within the ordinances.
It's not, no, it's not gonna change most of it. Some of it may, in the process of standardizing and having, like, to talk about the IDO. You know, we wanted to have one mailing requirement for if you have to mail notices instead of having 6 different ones. But it's not going to substantially change. The intent of this is to be as neutral as possible and to just update it to 160D and get it all into one ordinance so that it's easier to manage, easier to enforce. We have a lot of problems with code enforcement.
Right.
And one of the main problems we have is that every ordinance is different. And that causes problems.
Okay, what kind of example, could you give me just a little example of how something could change? I mean, you said about the mailing notices or something out, but what other differences could come up?
So we have a junk motor vehicle ordinance, we have abandoned mobile home ordinance, blah, blah, blah. Each one of them, one's 2 weeks worth of notice, one's 30 days worth of notice. I have to send different notices because usually have a bunch of problems, different kinds on the same piece of property. They don't like to disperse themselves. So we're sending out separate letters for everything because they all have a little bit different process and we have to give them so much time for each one. Whereas this way, we send them out one notice and we follow up everything every 2 weeks or whatever we're putting in there.
So kind of sort of simplifies things.
Right, okay, so that's an example. What other kind of differences would occur? I mean, that's notices, but what other things would time altogether? Just an example.
Well, based on what you said, instead of having standalone junk car ordinance and standalone home ordinance, the law council would come in on one umbrella. Is that right?
Fines, penalties, how much time you have, like, you know, some ordinances would say, okay, well, you can grant a 30-day extension. Another one might say you can grant a 10-day extension, or something where we have standardized processes to where we have one notice of violation form that has a bunch of boxes on it instead of 10 notice of violation forms.
Yeah, even an appealing a junk car ordinance that you don't like, what we said, looks nothing like the Phantom Mobile Home part or the Phantom Mobile Home ordinance. So if somebody's reading, they're sending us the wrong stuff. If they don't like what we said, well, no, we can't take this. It actually says, and you were supposed to turn in 10 days where this one said 15. We're sorry. Yeah, kind of.
And the one that came up the other day was lawnmowers. Somebody's got a whole bunch of lawnmowers on their property. What is that? Is that a junk motor vehicle? Is that trash?
Are you
Is
talking about
that
Barber
scrap
Street?
metal?
Well, it's an eyesore.
Depends on if it's a push mower or a ride mower.
Right, this is a push mower, right? I mean,
Are you talking about Barber Street?
No,
no,
this is a different
separate from
issue.
that.
Okay.
but no, that's.
Barbie Street was a solid waste ordinance issue, which is kind of shared, but not really. It really belongs in public health, so we're cleaning that up to make sure it clearly states who does it.
I'm trying to just get it to the point
So a
where
lot of the meat won't really change,
No.
but
That's
a
certainly-
lot of administrative issues and how we
right.
navigate through that.
When this ordinance massage is done, we'll look at it anyway, right?
This will be before you all next month.
Okay. yes.
Hopefully will be the only thing on the agenda.
Look
Yeah,
You said next month, is that correct?
Yes. If we can't get through it in that meeting, we will probably have to call a special meeting because I really need y'all to wrap it up at May. Because I need them to see it in June.
state law requires every governing board in the state to have updated all of our citations to 153A or from 153A to 160D. And some of the requirements in 160D are different. So we have to go through and change those to conform to state law. And all that has to be done by July 1.
Okay. All right. So they got it like that.
I think so.
All right. So that brings us to announcements and discussion. Ask a favor of you, sir. Sure. Would you read this all in my glasses?
Yeah, I'll hand you mine.
I need to go get some glasses out or somewhere.
April 7th, 2021. Dear Ms. Cobb, thank you and the board for allowing me to serve on the Alamance County Planning Board. I take this responsibility seriously. To further dedicate my time to my 2-year-old and the ever-growing needs of multifaceted teaching, I offer this letter of resignation. Sincerely yours, Andrea D. Cheek.
Hightailing it out of here.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I really appreciate, on from me, I appreciate your contribution to this county.
Your time. I was taught to finish from the start, so I have a little piece of it that's forwarded with me that I'm not completing the time and I was allowed to see through, so forgive me for that. I'm skipping out already. I don't know if any of you have school-age children or not. However, coming up after spring break in Alamance County, we will be having for the first time larger numbers in addition to teaching virtual. So it was a challenge to teach half the class and review the virtual simultaneously with no assistant. Now we're going to have the whole class face to face. So example, 17 children face to face in one classroom with 4 virtual, 1 teacher. And this is, and I'm the art teacher, so I will have 6 classes every day. And this is, it's got to require more than just doing like 8 hours in school. So, and then I have my 2-year-old too, and she's in law, so I don't say. But thank you all very much for
Thank you, everybody's comments. Thank you for what you've done for the county service. Much appreciated.
I'll be going a lot of prayer. That's for sure.
May I say one thing?
Yes.
My wife taught for 42 years. And I know the time that it takes. She would get up every morning at 5 a.m., get on her computer, her iPad, or whatever, and she would sometimes get home by 7 p.m. to fix a quick supper, and then stay on the computer till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, doing schoolwork. I can't imagine. I appreciate what you've done.
Hello.
He has a comment, and I think Ben's gonna have to weigh in on this. He says he makes a motion to appoint Rodney to fill the position Andrea is vacating. Oh, we're not really at that point, right?
We're not.
We appreciate it, Jim, but we can't do that just yet. He's already appointed technically, he's already been sent to the commissioners.
Yeah.
I love to.
James and Miss.
On that note, I hate to come behind it with something overwhelming. Commissioners did vote to fund the zoning ordinance for the Snow Camp Small Area Plan Monday. Our consultants will be consulting with me, start next week. They're actually on vacation this week. Starting next week, we'll start having those discussions. I did bring it up to commissioners that we can go with, or likely to go with the subcommittee, same as we did with the land development plan. They nominated some people, the old commissioners. We threw some people on the board just to make sure we got input from the right groups. And there were 2 planning board members on that board too. So those discussions will have to happen pretty quick so that we can get that project going. We have a moratorium only through next March, which sounds like not like forever, but it's really not that long when you're trying to put a document like this together. And a community that's not used to zoning, it's gonna take some work for our consultants. I've added meetings that they originally didn't have in our RFP because I feel like we need to meet with people out in the area a couple times. We need to meet with you all probably 3 times in the process, commissioners, just make sure the subcommittee feels comfortable. I added some meetings just because I feel like this is really new to us and we need to make sure we're really informed making the decisions.
And I think the board county commissioner board as exists now, want to be part of these public hearings and find out from the general public what their wishes are. So that's going to take probably too much. What? They keep looking at your foot. Is that what you did to your director? Is that?
No, I had nothing to do with that.
Okay.
Nothing to do with it. Matter of fact, I noticed it as soon as I walked in, when I first got here, I noticed it, and I think myself, I'm like, didn't have supper done on time, did you?
He's a mess.
Please have.
So yeah, I mean, theoretically, it's an 8-month process. I added some meetings. Hopefully we could keep that at 8 months, but 8 months will come and go pretty quick.
Yes, it did.
Got to get the UDO done and we'll jump into that. And gosh knows what else might come up. So.
Please have the record reflect that I did not make the statement about supper afoot.
I will take full responsibility. Yes, sir. Are we good?
That's all I have.
One question for Tom. So moving forward on the small area plan and setting up these, will that be updated on the planning department website?
We're probably going to create its own website that's part of the contract, like we did the land development plan, but I'll link it from our website because our consultants will maintain that website without, of course, our input, but it will be linked from our main site, probably under new business or new development, whatever. I have the land development plan under.
Good. All right.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Everybody have a awesome evening.
Thank you.
I got it.